I now call to order the regular board meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Commissioners. It is Thursday, May 4th, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Paula Hassel O'Connor Community Building at 733 North Prospect Avenue, Park Ridge. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mary Ann, please call the roll.
Commissioner Bendy? Here. Commissioner Bowe?
Here.
Commissioner Coyne?
Here.
Commissioner Grau?
Here.
Commissioner Hulting?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Here.
Commissioner Leduc?
Here. All right, does anyone have anything to amend, add, or delete to the current agenda? All right, is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll now move to the discussion of the Oakton facility indoor artificial turf field.
Good evening. My name is Terry Wolf. Am I good without the microphone?
Is anyone on tape going to be able to hear it?
Does the microphone help for the tape, matter for the tape or no?
That's fine.
All right, my name is Terry Wolf. I'm the superintendent of buildings and grounds with the Park Ridge Park District. Sorry, caught me off guard. Tonight we're going to work through the artificial turf, talk through the artificial turf project over at Oakton, and through all the different components of the system. We're also going to touch on sustainability, the options we're exploring. Then we'll be looking for feedback as well as taking questions from both the commissioners as well as the public. I'd also like to introduce Jim Thomeyer from White and Brian Smikowski from Field Turf are both here with me tonight in case we have any questions that I might not be able to answer on my own. So I think to begin with, it's really important to understand how an artificial turf system works. And so I want to talk through the various components of it. First and foremost, we have the grass or the turf. This can be either monofilament or slit film. These are depicted here. This would be a monofilament, and this would be a slit film. These grass portions are obviously for appearance, but also for playability that mimics the natural surface of grass. It also has the important job of holding in the infill. In our particular situation with it being an indoor facility, we really would only be looking at a slit film application, as a monofilament really doesn't have the longevity. It breaks down a little bit quicker, and with an indoor facility it'll have higher use because it'll be year round, so we'll get a longer, better product out of the monofilament. So the infill is the next portion of this system. The infill holds up these grass fibers that we just talked about. It acts as a ballast to help keep the surface in place, so that the turf, that grass, is about a 2-inch shag carpet basically. And it would lay flat if it were not for the infill. So this infill is layered in a manner that props those grass blades up and stands above them. It also provides impact attenuation or impact absorption. And then it mimics the give of a natural surface. So if you're running on a surface and you planted your foot and make a turn, it'll have some give as those little pieces that infill gives way. Additionally, some systems have an optional pad that would go underneath this whole system or in place of this whole system. Some of the systems that don't have rubber do require a pad for impact attenuation or to absorb the shock, and just either in addition to, because it doesn't have the rubber, or it's completely free of infill, and so you have to rely on a pad instead. I think the key thing here to talk about and to remember is that a lot of this system, a lot of this portion of it, this lowest layer here, is usually has a heavy stand component. And again, this part of this, the reason we have all this infill here is for is for ballast. So sustainability. The grass and turf, that carpet, that shag carpet that I discussed on the previous slide, that product has about a 10-year life expectancy. That product is fully recyclable. In fact, as of 2022, there is a facility in Texas that is actually recycling. It did go through a process of recycling that material. There's also a company in Europe, Rematch, that has been working on this for several years and has several plants that has been doing recycling of the actual turf products, the grass, the backing, and everything. The infill would actually last longer, but it needs to be removed as part of the replacement process that's involved in the grass. And so that is removed during the turf replacement at around 10 years. This product, all the infills that we have explored, can be sent to a plant for separating and cleaning, and then they can be reused in new production cycles going forward. So that part of the process is completely recyclable. Now the optional pad, depending on what it is and what it's comprised of, has varying degrees of recyclability, and again, it's dependent upon the different products. We'll talk a little bit more about the different products and the different options that we're looking into exploring in future slides. Here's a list of some of the explored options that we've looked at. We've got a standard crumb rubber with a cool play top layer, which is a different type of a plastic. Pure Select, which is olive pore with a cool play plastic on top. A Pure Select with a True Blend, another plastic composite with cork. A Brock Fill, which is a full natural wood chip option. And then a non-infill system, which just uses a pad and no infill. But before we discuss the details of those various options that we've explored, I think we want to address the crumb rubber in the room. Early on, we heard a lot about crumb rubber, and we recognized early that we needed to seek out some alternative infills. We've heard that we understand that there's a lot of published information on this, that rubber is safe, it's unsafe, there's inconclusive results, the studies were flawed, etc. In any way, we understood that we as an organization needed to explore alternative infills, and so that's what we're doing. With that, we did feel that it was important to start off by taking a look at standard crumb rubber. It's important to understand that this is the industry standard still. This is used in 9 out of 10 installations. It is recycled tires that are cryogenically frozen and then shattered. This system does not require a pad underlayment, and it is considered the optimal system for safe and consistent play. The products within the system are sourced in the U.S. and it grows at about $6 a square foot. Again, I want to take a moment to talk about the system here. And again, this would be sand. There's a mixture of sand and rubber. And the top layer up here of rubber, which is primarily where players would become in contact with, the rest of this is all buried by this top layer. So the primary point of contact is what's up here in this top layer, as it's just underneath the bit of the grass blades that protrude up to the top. In this second option, we again are looking at crumb rubber. Same system, still uses crumb rubber. We're still looking at the sand and the sanded rubber for the ballast and the infill mix. But this time, instead of topping it with that top layer of crumb rubber, we're proposing that we could use a cool play top layer. Now, cool play is a thermoplastic elastomer. It's a much different plastic. It's not the recycled tires. It's a plastic that is used in children's toys. It's much more recyclable. It also has some minerals that have cooling properties, which is why it's got the name Cool Play. It's primarily developed and used outdoors, but it can be used indoors. The purpose of it is to lower the ambient temperature of the field turf, but again, it works perfectly fine indoors. With this system, because there's still crumb rubber within the infill, there is no need for an underlaying pad. This has no change in playability compared to the crumb rubber system because of the granules and the way that the Cool Play interacts on the top. This Cool Play product is also sourced in the USA, and this adds about 50 cents a square foot. Now, the next few options are going to require an underlayment pad, and so I thought it'd be important to take a minute and talk about that for a minute, and how that works in the system. Two of the options that we're considering or looking at right now, and we've been priced out for underlayment pads, are the Thermagreen or a Brock pad. They're similar, they both act in the same way, they both go underneath the systems that we're going to describe. And they both serve the purpose of providing shock absorption and impact attenuation for the infill systems. The Thermagreen pads are made of post-industrial polyethylene. This product material is something that cannot be recycled, and so basically we're saving it for going to a landfill for the next 20 or so years. Whereas these Brock pads are made of expanded polypropylene, this product is recyclable at the end of its useful life, which is about 25 years. So it's a different perspective where we know that at the end of life we have a different option for it. We can recycle it and give it a new life afterwards. So with that, we're going to move on to a few different options. Pure Select olive core with Cool Play as a top layer. So in this installation, as you can see, we would still have sand, and we would have olive cores now, granulated olive cores, which is the Pure Select. So we've got a natural system working here as the ballast for this, and this is also helping us keep up with the grass blades that we're talking about. But here on the top layer, we're going to be anticipate using now the Cool Play, which is that TPE. So it's a different type of material than the chrome rubber, but still has that same playability. Again, because the system doesn't contain chrome rubber, it doesn't have the shock absorption, so it would require us to put down one of those two pads underneath it, which is previously discussed. This product is also sourced in the USA and comes at a cost of about $8.50 a square foot. The added cost comes from the cost of the underlayment pad primarily. This product has been being used and is what Schaumburg Park District is using at Olympic fields and their outdoor fields. They began 4 years ago replacing their outdoor fields and have been replacing them year after year. They'll complete that transition this year. Following up with them, even just as of this morning, they have no reported complaints of concerns with using the system, like abrasions or difficulty play or anything like that. The next option is Pure Select. Again, the olive cores with now True Blend top layer. True Blend is very similar to the Cool Play, but instead of being infused with those minerals to cool it down, they infuse it with cork. It's still that same TPE, that same plastic that's used in children's toys, but it's infused with cork instead. While this picture doesn't describe it as well as some of the past pictures, it still would have a base layer shock pad. We would have a mixture of sand and olive cores throughout, and then a top layer of this True Blend. True Blend is not sourced in the USA, but it does come at also $8.50 a square foot approximately. Rockfill is a newer item on the market. It's actually a highly engineered wood particle that's made from southern pine. In this scenario, this is a third-party vendor that provides just infill. They do make one of the pads that I mentioned, the Brock pad. They also make this Brock fill. It was new to the market in 2019. It has not been utilized in a lot of places, but it does have the wood chips or wood particles throughout the entire system. So you would be interacting with the wood fibers on the top layer. Obviously, it's a fully natural material throughout, and it does require a Brock pad underlayment for shock absorption. This product does void the warranty with some turf companies due to being a third-party infill. It is sourced in the USA, which is good from an environmental standpoint, at least helpful. However, in talking with the local sales rep, he does not recommend this product for its indoor application because it says it does have some dust issues, and due to its weight, when it doesn't have any moisture to wick, it tends to migrate and it gets a little bit light and flies around and has a little more what they call splash when a ball or someone hits it. So they actually, the manufacturer does not recommend this for indoor application. Now, each of the previous systems we've looked at have had infill and do require minor maintenance, which really works out to a couple of hours every 4 to 6 weeks completed by maintenance staff. This last system here that we're looking at would have no infill and would be virtually maintenance-free. The pad on this particular application is made from a PVC NVR. It may not be as easily recyclable. We do save on some maintenance costs, and it is made in the USA. But at $18 to $20 a square foot, it has a significant cost. So in summary and as a reminder, all of these systems have a life expectancy of approximately 10 years. That 10 years is driven primarily by the grass fibers in the system and the time it takes for those to break down and the need for that to be replaced. From here, we are interested in gathering feedback and answering any questions that you may have. I do want to point out that we also have a brief survey that has been distributed, or if it hasn't yet been distributed, will be distributed, and we would hope that you would answer that and leave it with us before you leave. After we review all these surveys and consider tonight's feedback, we do plan to bring a recommendation back to the board at the next meeting or possibly another future meeting. However, at this time, I would like to start with any feedback or questions from the board.
Can you refresh my memory on the square footage of the area?
Yes, thank you. So the square footage of the area that we're covering in turf is approximately 40,000 square feet.
40,000?
40,000.
Thank you.
And currently in the budget, we're carrying, actually it's 840, but right at that 850 is what we have coming forward.
You talked about Schaumburg using the olive oil, the pool play. Do you have feedback from other districts about the Pure Select, the pool play in particular?
Other districts using it or other
Yeah.
districts playing it?
Yeah.
It's not very common to use, as I started in my first slide, like 9 out of 10 fields are rubber.
Oh, okay.
I
I didn't know if
actually-
there was anybody around here
Well,
for that.
there are other places. So the Maine South did use the olive core, and they went with a different blend, and they had a different situation there where they didn't have a top layer on it. Schaumburg went about it took a different approach to it, where they really layered it and created a system. So it separated it so that you don't have those olive cores coming up to the surface or something that people are in contact with. So.
Because I know you, like you said, Schaumburg uses the Pure Select with the pool play. Do you know of any districts anywhere nearby that use the Pure Select with the True Blend top layer?
The only other location that I'm aware of that has used the Pure Select with True Blend is in the South, but they didn't do a true layering there. They kind of added on the True Blend as a top dressing to try to address a situation where they didn't quite get it right the first time, or they didn't put down.
So they didn't quite do the top, but I'm
Yeah.
asking if you knew of any districts, even if they aren't nearby, that do the.
So, no, and this was an interesting, as I was digging into this and working on this and working with Field Turf Rep, and I kept inquiring and pushing and asking for more information about these places that are using the alternative infills to, find more information out, to learn from trials and tribulations. I really found that we were truly looking for a needle in a haystack, and we are going to be pioneers in this. Just this afternoon, I learned that there are 6 facilities in the country that are not using rubber with the insert.
Is that indoor?
Indoor filters that are not using rubber. So, what we're looking at, and the reason that we kind of focused in a little bit on the Pure Select, because that's even, and with the cool plant on top, that's even a little bit different, is because, one of our neighboring districts with a very large regional facility that a lot of people are very familiar with, is doing just that very system, and it's been successful for them. And so it's at least got a little bit of test market data. It's got a little bit to say, hey, you know what, this is not a bad system. This kind of checks off, some of those concerns that we have, and, perhaps this is a good option for us, and really there's no reason why this couldn't work indoors. It doesn't have, the dust doesn't really seem to be kind of an issue with that like it would with the other. So.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the chart, it definitely seems like the Pure Select with Cool Play checks a lot of the major concerns we would have in terms of recyclability and made in the USA.
Yes.
Commissioner White?
So tell me, I don't think you actually mentioned it, but the standard crumb rubber with Cool Play top layer, why would we consider that? Is it just to separate the crumb rubber from people?
Yeah, it's an option, yeah. I mean, and it is an option. You could do that and finding cost savings there. I felt like it was an appropriate option to put out there.
Because obviously we don't need the Cool Play part of it, but it does isolate the crumb rubber below.
Yeah, so one of the concerns that people have with crumb rubber is that it's potentially or perceived to be a carcinogen, or they have concerns about having dermal contact with it. And so having a top layer of a different product would minimize that at the very least. And so that was just a different option that's available.
And when you talk about playability, are you referring strictly to, how the ball rolls or how it feels under your feet, or are we talking about injuries, stress injuries and other injuries to the people that are using the field?
So playability refers mostly to how the ball rolls, how stress injuries as far as like interaction with pivoting, turning, things like that. As far as like falling and impact, every one of these systems will meet that criteria, or it wouldn't be considered.
But the twisting injuries when you're playing soccer or whatnot would be reduced in the, or theoretically reduced in some of these.
And so, you might look at the one column here and say, cleat use allowable. Yeah, that's weird, very much, but that, well, for any of these systems that has an infill, you can use cleats. In fact, that's, despite what most places tell you at their facilities, that's actually the recommended shoe for an artificial turf with infill. They don't recommend like metal cleats, but a molded plastic cleat, that's actually the recommended shoe. You can use soled shoes, but that one, it'll still give and turn. Now, you can't use that on an Armacell pad. Why does that matter? Well, maybe your team is practicing and you're going to take advantage of the indoor turf on an opportunity where it's a rainy day and they don't want to have special shoes, but they can still use their traditional shoes that they would use to play whatever sport they're playing, and still play indoors. Just felt like that was another point to consider. But that's where that would become a problem. If you had a cleat on a non-infill system that doesn't have that give with the infill, your foot would be locked in and you just blow out your knee or something.
And I'm gathering, the last question I think I have is, and I'm gathering that the Cool Play top layer with the crumb rubber, we don't really have any data as to the impact of the health impacts of the crumb rubber being contacted. It's kind of theoretical.
Again, when it comes to the data on crumb rubber, it's solely about the existence of crumb rubber and its existence within the field of play and its availability to people to interact with. How that gets there in the varied degrees and amounts of it. I think that those, whether for or against it, I think those are all applicable to any system that has crumb rubber in it. In theory, when you've got it capped or topped with another product, you're drastically reducing the likelihood that you would be in contact with it, but it's present, it's there in the system, it could happen. There's nothing to say a kid couldn't dig it up and throw it in there, but it would be very difficult, so. I do also have, we do have, Brian from Field Turf brought some samples. We do have on the back counter back there, a sample, it's in a box. It's unfortunate, not plexiglass on the side, like you can see, he's working with my team on that after my request. But they've got a sample of the system that we are proposing Pure Select with Cool Play, so you can see what that feels like, see what it looks like, and how that interacts. It is a little bit interdispersed because it's in a travel case that goes sideways, and so it kind of spills around. So it's not, exactly a representation, but you'll see some darker brown granules, which are the olive pits, and then the green granules, which are is the cool plastic. So at some point here after the meeting, please take a look at that as well.
I mean, I'm gonna assume, people brought a lot of concerns to me before the referendum about crumb rubber. And Terry, what you say is right about like the research, like some of it says, say it's bad, some of it say there's no risk. There seems to be, it's not like it's set in stone like a lot of science, people are still looking into it. But my assumption would be that olive cores would be not as bad as tires, which have metals and different like organic compounds and things that could hurt people. So just thinking of it logically, I would think that an olive core would be less harmful than crumb rubber in terms of people being exposed to it. That being said, I don't know what's in the Pure Select. There's chemicals all around us. There's stuff in everything, and we're exposed to this every day. But I would say if you're comparing crumb rubber to an olive core, my assumption would be that the olive cores would be safer. But that's just, me looking at this tonight and not having looked into it extensively.
Any other questions, Councilor? Sure.
For transparency, I would like this presentation to be included in our packet. I know in the past they haven't, and we can't see it from the video. I don't even know if people can hear you, so I think that's important. Also, please don't use that color for print next time.
Oh, sorry.
I'm old.
I'll make it.
What are the costs associated with recycling?
That I'm not sure about. I don't know, but I do know, and I acknowledge that, that'll be a decision for the owner, for the park district at the time that it needs to be, replaced and removed. Is that we'll have to make that conscious decision to decide to recycle. The good news is that there are facilities that are doing it. There's more coming in and getting established. We know currently Field Turf has a facility in Pennsylvania that cleans and separates the infills. They're planning on opening one in Illinois in the next 2 to 3 years. We know that that Rematch company, I know that they've identified that they've got a facility that they're working on in Pennsylvania that will be the first North American facility. So, even from when we first started to look at this, first started to talk about this, first started, contemplating whether or not it was recyclable, I've actually seen some movement in that. But
So-
it will be a decision.
Well, would that be in our capital budget? Was that something you put in our capital budget plan?
Yeah, at this point, there's not, because I don't have no idea.
Well, that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
So we can feel good about recycling, but until
Sure.
we actually do it, it's nothing. It's
Right.
not recycled.
Sure. Any other comments or questions?
I had one, just to make sure, I thought you said that for the systems that cost $850 a square foot, that includes the cost of the pad, but I just wanted to clarify to make sure.
That is correct.
Okay.
And clarification, is it 25 years on the pad or 10?
So the one pad has about a 20-year life, and the other one has a 25, depending on the type of pad we go with. whereas the brass has a life of 10. So in theory, the pad could last for 2 cycles. We have to get tested to make sure, but
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely be a good question, because if we're buying something, assuming it has like a 20, 25-year lifespan, and then you find out it has to go out with the rest of it, then that's not as,
so the one with the 25-year, the Brock pad, that's a warranty. So they do come and test it in between to make sure. But if it's not, they will replace the parts for free.
That's good to know. Are there any other commissioner comments or questions?
Do we get, can we get some, is it useful to get some input from the?
That's what I was thinking.
I figured they would next.
Okay.
Great. Anybody from the public have any questions, comments, or concerns they'd like to share? I apologize, we don't have a podium out that way.
It's okay, I'll talk loudly, how about that? You had mentioned, you had looked at Main South.
And can you please state your?
Oh, sorry. My name is Peter Mirzwa, I live in Park Ridge. You had mentioned that you had investigated the turf at Main South, and I'm assuming you're talking about the new stadium turf, yes?
That's correct.
And what did you say that infill is?
They used Pure Select olive core initially, completely, with nothing on top. So
Okay.
the top layer that the players were in contact with was olive cores. Recognizing that it was a bit abrasive, they made an effort to resolve that and remove some of that top layer, and then brought in that true blend on top, which is one of the options that I proposed, which was basically the cool plate with the core instead.
Okay.
What they did not do was make it a full, true, separated layer. They took out some of the material and top dressed with some of the material to try to enhance what they did, but it was nowhere near how Schaumburg did it, where they layered the sand, layered the olive, and then put a true, here's just plastic. So the how it got there is a whole different story that's not necessary to get into, but what I can tell you is that there are situations in which they do use just the olive cores. In fact, I've learned that the University of Kansas actually has one of the few indoor facilities that uses the Pure Select, and they use it on their indoor softball field because the grit in that mimics infield dirt. So it works well in that scenario for top dressing on infield mix for softball baseball. So just too abrasive for soccer and football. But that's what their situation was and how it differs from Schaumburg.
And I'm guessing, but maybe you haven't gotten this far yet, but as you look at these numbers, the per square foot numbers, if you're talking 50 cents or a buck difference between some of your options, I'm guessing it doesn't make a huge difference relative to what you had projected in the budget for the cost of the turf?
Yeah, so again, we actually projected in the budget $8.40, so at $8.50 at 40,000 square feet, we're about $4,000
Right.
difference.
Okay.
And then, of course, of the size of that budget, it's a bigger budget.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Yes.
Siobhan Howe from Park Ridge. Sorry, and I know you said this, but how long has it been at Olympic in Schaumburg? How long have they been using it?
They've been doing the transition for the last 40 years now, so and they'll be completing their last one this year.
Okay, so some of the fields.
Yeah, they're all outdoor.
Right. And again, this might have been covered, but is there any, when there's the layering, does it get mixed at all over time, or is that what you were talking about the clear
That's-
layering system?
I mean, there's a little here and there, and I asked him that, like, oh, does that start to work its way up? Does that, and when I say him, I'm the superintendent, but my counterpart there in Schaumburg, and he says they're not seeing that at all. They're not seeing that. As of this morning, he says they're not aware of any issues or concerns about abrasion, it being too rough, it being too hard for them. So they're not having that issue. Yeah. Yeah.
Rob Leach, Park Ridge. Yeah, my son played on the Main South field, and it was unplayable until they did those fixes that you probably know in greater detail. So the question on this one was, what's the nap or length of the grass that you're looking at? Is it a ½ inch, 2 inch? What are you looking at from a playability?
The overall is 2 inches.
Okay.
I don't, Brian, how much of the grass is exposed after the infill?
Only about half an inch.
About a half an inch. So there's a total of then about 1.5 inches of infill within that 2 inches of grass.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Were you thinking of mixing some of these systems, like Main South, it sounded like they were mixing something, that FOIA guarantee or whatever?
No, I mean, most of these systems are all through field turf, but I don't, we wouldn't necessarily consider, I hadn't considered mixing them.
Okay.
I'm not sure that there would be a value in mixing a cool play and a true blend to top off the olive cores necessarily, so.
So Main South did not do that? No, they did not?
Main South just took a different approach. They thought that, you know, just the olive cores would work out.
But then they had to add more, huh?
And then it just, once they started using it, they realized it was a little too.
And that didn't void it, and they're...
They didn't void, they were working with,
No.
with the rep to do that, but it was.
Okay.
Anybody else? Great, well, if not, I believe Margaret has distributed our brief and simple survey. So if you would kindly fill that out and leave it, on your way out, you can leave it by the table where we had said sign in. If you haven't signed in, please sign in so that we can follow up with you. As I mentioned, we intend to follow up with the board at a subsequent meeting and provide recommendation of feedback based on tonight's feedback. If we've got you signed in, your contact information, we'd be happy to let you know when that's going to happen so that you can join us at that meeting if you're interested. If not, we will just follow up with you with what's been recommended to the board.
Terry, for those who aren't able to make it tonight, will they be able to fill out the survey online possibly later on?
We didn't know if we're going to put it out to the general masses, but we'll definitely put this presentation online, and I guess, you know, we can certainly send something out. It's not going to hurt anything. But they wouldn't have heard the whole presentation, so that would be a little tricky.
Were we, and I'm sorry, were we going to hear from the turf guys? I'm calling you the turf guys. Sorry, because I don't.
I mean, he came out to help answer any questions.
Okay, I didn't know if you had any other, like, insights.
Brian, did you have anything you'd like to
to
add?
add?
Terry's covered it all pretty much.
Okay.
I can tell you guys, I think we've shared about a dozen emails over the past few weeks with a ton of questions, and he probably knows more about our website than I do now. But yeah, I'm here to answer any questions, anything like that, if there is any.
Well, okay, I got a question. If price not being a consideration for the sake of argument, why wouldn't we go with Pure Select Cool Play Top Play with the olive core instead of the chrome rubber? I mean, is there some advantage other than cost?
So,
I mean, to the players,
with the balance of finding an alternative infill, when we created Field Turf 25 years ago, our goal was to make it play as close to natural grass as possible. So that's where the 3-layer of the sand, the cryogenic rubber, and the rubber on top comes into play. And over the last 5-6 years, and that's what happened at Olympic Park, they came to us. They actually had all rubber fields, and they came to us and said, hey, we have all these communities coming to these fields. We just don't want to answer questions. We have all the research that's been done, but what can you offer? So we worked with them to come up with this olive core, because with alternative infills, the two bugaboos that I hear is it's either too heavy and too abrasive, like at Main South, or it's too light, like coconut, things like that, and it moves all over the place. So your maintenance guys are kicking their heads in because they have to be out there maintaining the field all the time. That's not what turf is about. We want to make sure it's easy on the maintenance guys to do all that, but it plays safe. So that's where we came up with the olive cores and the cool play. That cool play plays as close to rubber as possible, so that's why we use it on a ton of fields. So that's just the safest biomechanical foot planting system that you have out there if you're going to go alternative, is that 3-layer with the sand and olive core, and then cool play topping.
And I guess, I think I'm hearing you say there may not be a particularly significant difference between that and the chrome rubber with the cool.
Yeah, the only big difference is why you need a pad underneath, and that olive core is heavier than rubber. So because it is heavier, it's a little denser, you put that pad under there for the safety on falling and things like that. So that's the major difference and why you see the price difference as well, is for that pad and sourcing that olive core. Yep.
Is there anything added to the olive core that might be a preservative or a chemical that's worth mentioning, or is it strictly olive?
It's strictly ground up olive fits.
Well, thank you very much for answering those questions. This has been very informative. Obviously, members of the public, you're welcome to stick around for the rest of our fascinating meeting. But if not, feel free to help yourself to a ginger cookie or a lemon cookie on your way out.
Yeah, just so you're aware, the next topic on our agenda is about the design changes, so you may also be interested in that topic as well. And if you are interested as well, as you're filling out your survey, before you fill out your survey, as I mentioned, there's a product sample in the back of the cool plate and the olive oil of the first.
Maybe take a minute so anybody who wants to has a chance to go take a look at the turf. Because I want to go take a look at it, no big deal.
Look at the turf today.
It's not going to take us that long. Let's take a 2-minute turf peeking break.
That's right. So I figured out after I had a
We're still in the meeting. The meeting's still going on. Cindy, the meeting's still going on. We did not cut out the break. We're still in the meeting.
We lost. We gotta get him back.
We're still in a meeting.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to take the break.
Yes.
That was my concern.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So moving on to the Oakton facility and park design update. We welcome James Thormeyer.
Good evening. My name is Jim Thormeyer. I'm a senior project manager with White & Company. White & Company has been on board working with the Park District not only on the architecture and engineering, but also the land planning, landscape architecture, as well as the construction management component of the project. And just for the record, my involvement in the project is post-referendum. So as we get through the presentation, I'll do my best if there's any particular questions that lead back to the conceptual plan that led to the referendum. So I'll do my best to get an idea of what sort of led and drove some of those decisions. So first thing I want to do is start out, kind of revisit a little bit about the program that went into the referendum, and then we'll show not only the site plan, but the floor plan, that conceptual floor plan that was part of the referendum. So this is the site plan that went into the referendum, and just for the record to go through the program from that. The referendum items identify building and equipping an indoor sports facility, building and equipping a studio ice rink, improving the Oakton Park facilities and site, which includes constructing a looped walking path, improving the golf driving range, as well as repairing and expanding the parking lot. Also, it's not new to the program, the dog park, but the dog park will be relocated, which is currently east of the rink, to the north end of the property. So going through the site plan, again, the introduction of an indoor turf facility to the north, lobby and support spaces in between the indoor turf as well as the existing Oakton Ice Arena, and then the construction of a new studio ring just to the south of the existing arena. Obviously, an expansion of the parking lot above and beyond what is currently there. Now we've got an existing set of oaks, obviously, that is in between the driving range as well as the existing parking lot and ice rink. That is being obviously salvaged as best as we can, and also creating a community gathering space within that existing oak grove that also picks up on this meandering path that will go through the site and provide, I believe it's approximately about a half-mile total walking path once all is said and done. Now looking at the plan, it's color-coded, and I'll go through the colors fairly quickly just in case it's hard to read from where your distance is. To the right of the plan, which is north on the property, is the new indoor field house, which we've been talking about the options for the turf. Just to the south, in between the rink and the field turf, you've got your primary entry lobby space, you've got support administrative spaces, including your reception, skate rental. To the east, towards the rail line, you've got two multi-purpose rooms along with a small concession area, and then you've got your main restroom facilities. Now working to the east of the existing rink, you have a corridor that leads down. You've got your hockey team rooms and other support spaces, puck practice area, a athletic training facility in conjunction with the renovated arena. And then that leads to a pre-function area outside of your new studio rink. And then in between the studio rink and the existing rink was your resurfacing or Zamboni room, as well as the ice mechanical systems. So post-referendum, White & Company in mid-January reconvened with the Park District staff and some of their facility operators and started digging into some of the thoughts and concerns about the operations, as well as revisiting the concept plan, which I think dated back to maybe March of 2022, and starting to fine-tune where we need to make some adjustments based on a lot of these factors, which included just the general operations of the space, which may or may not have gone into primary thinking when it came to the concept plan. I think the concept plan was primarily big picture, identifying the size of certain components, in particular the field house and the studio rink, and then that budget was provided for the referendum number. Now, during that time, since mid-January, we've had a number of meetings with Park District staff, facilities people, Zoom calls, continuing to refine the plan based on feedback from staff. We've also had meetings with Park Ridge, Building Department, Planning and Zoning, as well as Fire Department to get feedback on what we're proposing and any limitations we might be faced with it, as well as any kind of requests we may have to make above and beyond for variance purposes. We did get some positive feedback from those meetings that helped guide what I'm about to show you with the proposed plan. So we feel comfortable there that once we do go to the next step and go through the planning and zoning process for the front end reviews, that we're not going to find any hiccups or unknowns that might drive us in a different direction. So on top of the feedback from staff, we also have to take into account budget concerns. We've seen some significant increases in costs over the last year, not on top of just typical inflation for the country. So as we've massaged the program, the value add that White & Company brings obviously is having that internal cost estimating team from White Construction, where we've done a number of stops and starts, unfortunately, because we were going down a path that we thought was cost effective. We get feedback and we find out we're going down the wrong direction. So what we've ended up with, I threw this slide in here just to show you where some of our focus was at as we revisited the concept plan. Again, the plan is fairly small, but I just wanted to identify the plan on the top left was basically taking the sketched concept plan, putting it into digital software. The bottom left, the first thing we visited was a relocation of the studio ring. Part of that was driven by trying to provide a more efficient parking layout. If you go back to the original site plan, you can see just east of the existing arena and the proposed location of the studio rink, you've got an area of parking that's great. It provides maximum parking count for the site, but for security purposes, the intention is to only have the entry point on the west side. There's really no convenient secondary entry, so anyone parking there on those particular days where there's significant crowds, you have to walk all the way around the building in a U shape, which is not the most convenient layout. So we considered moving the studio rink into that area between the existing ice arena and the railroad line, partly driven again by a more efficient parking layout. The second issue we looked at was that with the location of the studio rink to the south, you create a fairly long corridor. Now, building a long corridor means you're increasing your square footage to get to all your function spaces is not the most convenient use of that square footage. Any additional square footage for the building is going to drive up your cost. So we tried to consolidate the space, in particular to the east. There's a space next to the rail line that wasn't really being utilized. It was sort of a dead space, for lack of a better term, not really having a reason or a function in that area. So as we got to the bottom right and tried to squeeze in some of the program space, move the studio rink, we were only getting a few thousand square feet out of the building. So what we ended up with is this plan here. Now, we stuck with the color coding. Now, this is oriented north is to the left. The largest changes with this plan there's two items. Number one is the orientation of the field house. The reason we reoriented the field house was that if you look at the original plan, with sort of a trapezoidal shape, it's not the most efficient use of that space. And coming in with a more orthogonal approach, there's a little more form and space and order to the layout. the lobby space in between the field house and the existing ice rink, we feel it's wide enough, it's a 50-foot span, that it can handle the crowds, but that the use of that square footage is more valuable. The other item on this plan, which would be new to the board, is we are proposing that we reuse the existing two-story building that currently functions for the ice arena to house the locker rooms as well as ice mechanical. The reason for this partly is driven by White and Company. We have a heavy emphasis on sustainability. We have what's called a White Sustainability Standard, which we apply to every project we do, regardless of scale. These are cost-neutral items that we propose that increase efficiencies in not only lighting, HVAC efficiencies, health and wellness, but also on repurposing and reusing existing space. What we were finding when we went through the budget numbers is providing new construction for space that could be programmed inside that existing building was an inefficient use of that budget. Plus the current use of that two-story space, the second floor is where some of the locker rooms are at for the hockey teams. Having to use a flight of stairs to come down with your skates on to access the rink is not the most ideal approach for a space of that use. So what we are repurposing is team locker rooms, showers, coaches' rooms, including storage on the first floor of that two-story space. Now, getting back to the conversations that we had with the building department, we were able to work out with them. There's a particular code item in regards to the occupancy of the building for a field house, ice arena, and studio rink. These are mixed uses for assembly. Those would require fairly expensive firewalls to have to separate the building into 3 separate buildings. We were able to work with them to get a unlimited area building at a single occupancy type, but that also meant that we cannot use that second floor. We can treat it as a mezzanine, but we're limited in the area that we can use on the second floor. We're limited to 1,000 square feet. I believe right now it's about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, the floor plate. But we intend to use that solely for storage and mechanical use, not for public access. Again, that allows us to stay identified as a single-story building, which meets that code criteria, which became very valuable in terms of the budget constraints. I'll zoom in a little bit. I'll start with the field house. Talk a little bit about the layout.
Oh, before you move on to the field house, I had a question.
Yes.
So if the second floor room, like it remains there, and the building, there's, such large alterations being made to it, would that room then have to be ADA compliant? Because currently it's just a staircase heading.
The 1,000 square feet is limited. Part of it is by accessibility. If you provide a space larger than 1,000 square feet and it's public access, then you need to make it accessible via an elevator.
But if it's not public access,
If it's not public access, if it's
you don't have to
mechanical
make it
storage,
ADA.
it's strictly accessed by staff. You're not. So essentially what would happen is we would have to cordon off a portion of that and make it limited to 1,000. The rest would be attic space.
Oh,
That's how we get around that.
all right.
So with the field house, again, there's not much of a change based on the original program, but there's 2 items I wanted to call out. We do have a walking path around the field of play. So what's shown in that kind of orange color is identified as the walking path. Now what we are proposing, for a couple reasons, is to make that walking path the same material as the turf, just a different color. Partly that's due to it's much more cost effective than doing, let's say, a rubber type floor that's identified solely for walking. The install for the turf would also be simpler because you'd be doing, a simple square to the ends of the structure and the walls. But then the third item of that is more of a maintenance perspective. If you've got activities going on the turf, you're going to get the little infill that'll pop around, that's going to fall onto the walking path. That walking path would have to be maintained and swept off to keep that free and clear. So we're proposing, we feel it's comfortable that it's also going to be a better benefit on people's joints for that matter, on a softer surface that you can wear flat-soled shoes, and it's not going to have an impact on the performance of that turf. The other item I wanted to identify, I'm going to have to go back to the original plan, is the storage for the field house. The original concept plan, we were running storage end-to-end on one wall, albeit a fairly shallow depth of 8 to 10 feet. The square footage of it on paper looks fine, but the actual efficiency of that space is not ideal. Without having the depth to that space, putting random soccer goals, breaking those down and putting those into storage is not ideal. So what we ended up with was a deeper storage area on the east side of the building that we worked out with, conversation with staff that the depth there certainly helps when it comes to these larger items that need to be stored when there's another function going on the actual field there. I'm going to jump over real quick to the administrative space just to the east of the field house. It's shown in this sort of, well, it doesn't show it on the screen very well, but the O's stand for office. We'll have reception area that wraps around the administrative spaces. Skate storage is also behind this reception counter, so that counter will also act as skate rental location. We have opportunities here for not only storage behind the reception, we also have opportunities for storage of small items underneath the countertop. That program is still to be worked out how we utilize that space. But you also have your primary restrooms in this bank of the building as well. What is shown in yellow is our concessions area. This would provide access not only from the interior but the exterior to an outdoor patio where the cursor is at here. That would be an opening directly to the exterior when the need arises. If you have people that would like to purchase something while they're sitting outside, they don't need to come into the building to do that. We've identified a seating area. Now, that seating area can be a mix of casual seating for someone waiting in the lobby, waiting for an event to start, or that can be seating for the concession use. We did want to leave some space, obviously, for circulation around that seating area. Now, what we feel works well with this lobby layout, in particular with how reception wraps around the edge of that field house, is there's good visibility of everyone coming into the building. Again, this is the only entry point, public entry for the building. But you also have good visibility into the rink, where this, call it bar top level seating is located. That'll be a glass wall looking into the ice rink. And then on this section here, this would be storefront type wall. So that allows people at the reception desk to have good visibility into both program spaces. Wrapping around the building, I'll stop with the ice rink, but let me get up through the other spaces here before we get to that. Now, we've maintained 2 multi-purpose rooms, and then there's a training room next to multi-purpose. The idea here is that multi-purpose is close enough to the lobby, instead of having to go down a corridor to get to it, in case someone is coming to this building strictly for an event that's being rented out from the multi-purpose room, that from a wayfinding perspective, it should be fairly easy to find. Now, the training room, it's adjacent to both the studio rink as well as the existing rink that's being renovated. My understanding is that that's primarily used by the teams that use the ice. So we wanted to locate that from an adjacency perspective as close to the ice sheets as possible. A recent add to the program was off of the studio rink. There are 2 smaller team rooms. So when the studio rink is hosting younger hockey teams, they have access to a quick team room versus having to come all the way through the existing rink to get to it. We still maintain the ice resurfacer and ice mechanical room in between the two sheets, so the Zamboni access will be fairly quick to get to both sheets of ice. We're still studying to make sure that that room's as big as it needs to be, just for maneuverability of the Zambonis. Now, with the existing rink, we did a couple different studies. We had some studies where the bleacher seating was on the west side. What we found from staff feedback was that having the bleachers on the west side meant, if you can see where my cursor is at right here, majority of fans would be coming in through that point fairly far away from reception, so it's a little difficult to keep an eye on who's coming and going. What we're proposing with those doors right there is those are exit-only doors. So based on the assembly use of the ice rink, the doors that are in the four corners, only the door near the east side, the northeast side of the lobby, that would be your primary entry point. Hence, that led to the bleachers wanting to be on the east side, and on the west side, that became the team benches, and we have some available space in between the blue and frames, bless you, for storage, whether that storage is for affiliates, whether it's for use by the rink, that's to be determined. But we have ample space and depth to add storage. We know that's at the rink. We also took the puck practice area and opted to put it into that southwest corner. Again, anyone using that space is primarily coming through the rink or perhaps from the team locker room, so that adjacency helped, being that not many people would come to use puck practice without coming through the rink itself. And again, with the repurpose of the first floor, this is where we have our team rooms, as well as shower facilities. Now, the one change from the concept plan, again, we had team rooms on the east side. Those team rooms were roughly 200 square feet. Been talking with Brent and his team, we need to be much larger than that. Reusing that first floor of the existing building allows us to give ample size to those rooms without shortchanging them. We're at 350 to 400 square feet for those, as well as ample shower facilities. Now, the next couple slides.
Can I ask something?
Of course.
So if a team comes in, they come through that vestibule down there, a person comes in to play hockey with their team. So they walk in and they go straight up, hang a right way up there, go all the way around to get to the.
Correct. Everyone would be, as of now, everyone would be coming in through these sets of double doors.
Down in the bottom.
No, where the cursor is at right here.
No, come in the building.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
they start in here, then.
Everyone's coming through this vestibule.
All right, then I want to go to my hockey team room.
You would still have to come through these doors. So you would have to come through the lobby. And this was a request.
But you walk right past the bleachers?
You would have to, there is space here to walk around the dashboards from the rink. You would have to walk this way to access the team locker rooms. It's not ideal. We can work with the facility operators to determine if there's another access point. With the existing building and repurposing this for the team locker rooms, we have a door shown here. This is for exiting of that space. There's the potential that door could, if it works out and it's needed, that could become
During
the
match
secondary
play.
entry point,
Right, during match
direct
play or
access for
something.
the teams.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
The next few slides, just want to give you an update on, with reusing the two-story space here, this is now how our parking layout works. We are still at 250 parking spaces, which is approximately what the conceptual plan had. This becomes a more robust parking area directly in front of the building. Again, on those events, when you've got the ice show, if you've got tournaments going on the weekends, and this parking lot will be filled, at the very least, the furthest you're walking is one of these spaces here and not necessarily from the other side of the building. We didn't extend to show the full site, but the intent is still there with the walking path on the exterior that would continue on from this. Now, this particular path here, that's a required fire access lane. That was worked out with the fire department. They need a dedicated path around the entire building, but that path would also double as your walking path. But then on this side of the property, the walking path would veer off and become its own dedicated pedestrian path. Outdoor plaza is in this area here. Now you can see the backside of the building, we get a little bit away from this orthogonal plan, and that was just try to maximize the available space in that area. Having a couple jogs in the building was better than having a number of tapered walls that was driving up the cost of the budget. But with this one, you'll have the indoor turf and the studio rink would be pre-engineered buildings. Obviously column-free spaces to provide for those programs. The existing ice arena, that structure is being salvaged. We will reskin the walls. The roof is staying as is. These infill spaces here are just single-story, flat roof areas. Obviously, we're repurposing the two-story. We will do a little bit of demolition work on this area, since that is the front facing. That's the first thing you're going to see from the street. Now, when the trees and the parking lot get to maturity, obviously the visibility of the building will drop a little bit, but it's still going to be the first elevation you see, so we're going to put some emphasis on that elevation as well. One thing I wanted to point out as well, one of the significant cost drivers of this project, unfortunately, is the underground storage for stormwater. We can't get around it. We have to deal with different criteria for both MWRD as well as Park Ridge. They have differing criteria. It's a significant percentage of our budget. We've gone through, I think, 3 studies for pricing purposes to identify what's the most cost-effective way. We are also studying an opportunity to try to do some surface detention where we can to minimize the volume that we have to put underground. It's unfortunate because it's something you're never going to see, but it's something we have to provide for a site of this size. So this particular area right here, sort of a leftover space, initially we thought this might be a nice plaza area. We're now targeting this for some surface detention to try to minimize that volume underground and alleviate some of that cost. Much more cost effective to do surface detention than it is to do an underground storage tank. Now, as we move along, that's one of our initial next steps, is getting further along in the engineering so we can tighten up those numbers and find out exactly what are we going to need to provide, which might help us alleviate some of the constraints elsewhere in the project.
So when you say surface detention, are you talking like bioswale, semi-permanent pavers, like what specific?
We're talking bioswale, rain garden type, allowing for volume control as well as infiltration control, but it would be a heavy landscape there. It would be similar to bioswale. And these particular strips in the parking lot are already identified for that purpose as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is the patio area, because of this turning the turf from at a maple to more straight, is the patio area a lot smaller? It seems like it is, but I don't know.
So I don't have a square footage on it.
I just compared to the original plan.
Right. Let me go back to the concept plan. Yeah, we didn't have an identification of the perimeter of it.
There was no patio. I thought there was with like
Yeah,
the,
we did have.
the fireplace and all
Yeah, we
that
did have a
stuff,
patio.
the outdoor fireplace.
So on this plan we identified, but we did not put a perimeter onto it. Maybe on the,
Okay.
maybe on the site plan.
See,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
there we
right
go,
there.
on the site plan. I would say,
Okay.
I would say we're
I
probably.
didn't remember, it just seems like it's about the same.
I would say we're close to maybe about 80% of,
Okay. I
Again, this
didn't
was-
remember how big the original was.
Is there an increase in the size of the concession area, or is it about the same?
it's slightly bigger by maybe 100 square feet. What we did is we compared it to some other facilities that were concession only and not restaurant type use, and we were finding that the kitchen and prep area was running at about 600 to 800 square feet. Now, obviously, with us identifying some of that lobby space to also be seating for concessions, if need be, we can kind of control that area and not have to deal. I don't think it's worth having a dedicated kind of roped off type area or putting barricades. Because we also have we also do have that seating here along the glass that'll look into the ice rink. We're anticipating that people would grab something and sit there and watch as well. So even though we don't have a dedicated seating area specific to the concessions, we're providing seating adjacent nearby to it for options.
So that reduces, we can't have liquor then, right?
We have to look at that. We can still have liquor. I think we do have to pour it off an area if we do that. So if we make that decision, we can adjust that. But this does not allow, that size does not allow for a full restaurant. But we can have, any concessions we want.
Like the pool, like Centennial?
Like, it's like
that. Or less than that.
That one is, it's probably a little bigger, but yes, a similar service in terms of food.
Oh,
And
so
we
you'll
were,
have ovens and refrigerator.
we were gonna talk to a vendor about this. Have we done that yet or no? About the size or the design? Oh, you guys had mentioned you were thinking about it. And I think that window's kind of, the outdoor window.
It's an option at this point, but okay.
We got 2 more slides here. Next slide, again, just trying to give you an idea of the scope of the massing, how we see it. Now, what I will tell you is we've been studying a number of different materials for the veneer of the building. The field house and the studio ring are pre-engineered buildings. They're going to have a fairly simple metal panel skin. That's what the budget allows. But what we can do is we can study using different colors and orientation of some of these panels. Now, where we have opportunities are, you can see the cursor, we've got a significant wall here that most visitors are going to be walking by or driving by, so we're going to put some more emphasis on that. The back of the building that faces the rail line is really kind of back of house. I think that's more, we would pick a cost-effective material. We would identify some materials around the patio that are a little more dressed up, because again, that's public access. You want to give the best impression there. Not even the staff hasn't seen this because this was the last few days, but I wanted to show you what we were envisioning with the 2-story space. Hopefully you can see it from the back. Right now, what you've got 3 small bump outs. What used to be the 2 entry points to the locker rooms when the pool was here, and then you've got a small bump out here that leads to some office space. Our intention is that we would yank those off. This overhang that you see is actually a structural cantilever for the 2nd floor. Right now you've got a terrace, an outdoor terrace up there. That we would pull the building back, we would reskin it, and that edge would provide a nice opportunity for some signage. We're thinking some pin-mounted signage, plus this back wall, we're proposing that glass, which is a bronze tinted glass, that we pull that out, we infill it with a different material. That's another backdrop potential for signage. Could be the Park District logo. The only thing we are concerned about is we don't necessarily want to draw people to it as an entry point, knowing that that's our entry. But there's opportunities there for some surface signage, logo, icon, something up there. And that at the entry, again, we feel regardless of budget constraints. We feel that the entry, honestly, it's the most prolific aspect of a visitor because everyone's filtering through there, that we're putting a few dollars into that space with a larger volume, a bit of an overhang. Again, we're proposing that we could do some signage underneath. Fairly simplistic sign, but we think it works well. It's a curtain wall type system with a little bit of volume. It's a nice open presence. One other item that's not shown on this is we initially had skylights shown on both the studio rink as well as the field house, and that was driven by energy code criteria for daylighting. What we did find is we have some options here to go in a different route, provides a clear story type glass. We're always cognizant of issues of glare, in particular with performance spaces, as well as in studio or ice rinks. Depending on the quality of the glass that you provide, heat gain in an ice rink is counterproductive in how your dehumidification system works and how your ice mechanicals work. So we wanted to pull that out because we want to revisit that, and our intention is the next time you see these plans, we'll have a little more robust design with the facade, knowing what some of our limitations are now and what some of our opportunities are. So again, this was, again, more from a massing perspective to give you an idea of how this would look. The last slide is basically the view that you would get as you enter the building. This is your primary view when you come in. The intention is open ceiling structure to help provide some volume so people aren't feeling constrained when they walk in. It's an inviting space. But you can see on this one, the glass to both the field house as well as the ice rink. Again, allows people, if they don't want to go into either, to have a view. It helps with security purposes for people that are housed at reception to be able to look into both those spaces as needed. In this one, you can also see that bar top seating with up against the glass. We've got some random seating throughout the lobby for people that are waiting. In the backdrop, you can see the concession area. We do drop the ceiling a bit and provide a little bit of a presence at that reception area, but the intention is very clean, open look, painted structure, very open, inviting. Again, we have some limitations on how high we can put the flat roof, and that has to do with the existing roof height for the rink. So to try to, again, alleviate the thought of walking into a somewhat of a confined space, we think that open structure would work out well for this space. And that is the last slide. So happy to field any comments, questions.
So what material is going behind the reception there? Is that
So
a wall?
What we are envisioning is, and I'll just go back one slide, the material that's at the entry is sort of a wood look siding. We don't know yet if it's aluminum wood look, if it's a composite material, but the intention is that that warm wood look would come into the lobby as an application on that wall as you enter on that left side. We're kind of playing with the idea of hot versus cold, field house versus ice rink. The field house side is the warm side, the ice rink's a little more on the cool edge, but that the intention is you're bringing the outside inside.
I just know there was talk early on of the trees that come down that they would live on in the walls inside, but it sounds like
That is part of what we're going to be pricing. And I'm glad you brought that up, because one other item I failed to mention is when we repositioned the field house, as much as a lot of it had to do with the orientation adjacent to the other spaces and the functionality, we also knew that there might be an impact on the tree count. We had our landscape architects do the survey with the original layout where the building was tapered and sort of aligned with the railroad line. With that plan, we were losing 64 trees. By reorienting this building, we're losing 54. So we're actually saving 10 more trees. Our intention is to repurpose those trees in some capacity. In all likelihood, it's probably wall veneer and it's countertops. Other perhaps FF&E where we can recondition those and tell that story to the community of where this is coming from. That's also part of that sustainability component that we push for. And I know that was a big part of the community meetings leading up to the referendum.
Go ahead.
So in terms of the roof that would be retained from the original structure, this might be more a question for Terry. What's the lifespan, projected lifespan of that roof, and how old is it currently?
It was replaced in 2011, so we have at least 10, 15 years now. And if we look back, I believe it was 25 to 30.
All right.
I'm totally jealous of your job, being able to play around with the creative side of this, so.
You don't know all of them.
It's probably not all
He
fun,
works in
right?
IT.
Yeah, right. In any case.
That's like a doctor.
So is there any concern about concessions and delivery, removal of waste and food? And is that road that goes around the back, can that double also as some sort of a?
That's a great question. That fire access lane, we're also showing connections to that for deliveries. So this corridor here, part of that is it's required, we have to provide, we have a dead end corridor, we don't provide that access to the exterior. So that's primarily exit, but that can also act for deliveries to go sort of behind the scenes, the concessions without having to come to the block. And then where we have trash located on the site plan, it is near, that's that structure right there. It doesn't have to be
Where?
housed.
We can
I'm sorry, this, can you see my cursor?
barely.
No.
We need
the old
to
dog
make
shop.
magnify
Oh, there you
glass.
go.
Thank you. Thanks, Cherry, an hour in. The whole
I just
time
saw
I'm
it sitting
trying
there,
There.
right there.
Now again, that could go on the other side of that entry point, the fire access, but we're trying to maximize that available area for that surface detention if we study that. But the intention is they can use that fire access lane. I'm assuming for a concession site, it's probably a bread size kind of truck. If a fire truck can fit on that road, then yeah, we're not bringing in.
One other question, with the expansion of or the rearrangement of the parking, is there additional trees that need to come down because of that?
So the parking count, or I'm sorry, the tree count that we have the landscape architects do, the delta, the loss of trees, that number is included in what would happen with that parking lot.
So it doesn't change, you're saying, what?
We've,
Yeah,
it's better.
64 to 54.
Yeah.
The whole. So, is for the turf field and the studio rink, what was it was prefabricated building, what term did you use?
Pre-engineered metal.
Pre-engineered metal.
Correct.
I'd love to see what a typical one of those would look like. I just, as this image,
It's
Laverde?
Niles.
Is that what
Have you
Laverde
seen the
is?
Niles facility?
Laverde, yeah, okay.
And like I said, we understand in particular that south face of the field house on the exterior, that is right at your entry point.
Yeah.
We need to put some emphasis on that because that's going to be a heavily visible elevation. On the other sides, I think the money's better spent on the more visible side. And that's
Yeah,
why
I
we also
agree.
provide some clear
It's just
sources.
the people going by in the train. If we let people move, they can't see.
So, one other thing I need to bring up, that the permeable pavers are out of this plan, correct?
So the three studies that we did, that our civil engineer did, they are doing a mix of a percentage of permeable pavers to see where the bang for the buck is. Because Park Ridge does not give you credit for permeable pavers when it comes to the design of the stormwater system, the underground storage. In all likelihood, the permeable pavers is, it's an extra in a way that doesn't help us with the storm.
Okay, but we've had discussions on that, and we've had aldermen willing to go to bat to change that, and we were told it didn't matter. So does it matter, or doesn't it matter?
So, if I can interject. So the next step for us, the first step, is these conversations with not only Park Ridge, but MWRD, to talk through what they will allow us to do in the hopes that, in particular with permeable pavers, that they would give us credit for that, at least partial.
MWRD or the city?
The city.
Okay,
MWRD allows it, the city does not.
okay, because we were told to take that off the table. It was not, no longer a problem. We had a different problem. So we need to be aware if that's a problem, because that can be fixed.
I think it was the timing, we talked about the timing of when.
Well, I think Terry said because our project got so big, there were other issues, and it wasn't the permeable paver.
There's definitely, there's a list of issues that the city has and a list of issues that MWRD has, and depending on where you're at on these two different points,
Sure.
they intersect and they get from good to worse or better. It's kind of a weird.
But if the reason we're not doing them is because of city code, that I believe is fixable. That's what I'm saying. So we can't say we can't do it, okay?
Right.
Tell us, and we will get that taken care of.
And it's a relevant question too. The city isn't currently, and I know this would be, the city isn't currently collecting, like they set up the stormwater utility, but they're not collecting any revenues from the stormwater utility. But if they were ever to do so, they would need to get their act together in terms of how they're treating the pavers if they're going to give residents and business owners credit for any retention that happens as a result of those. So, I mean, I feel like it's something, I don't know if they'll ever collect.
We should be a leader on
But I mean, I feel like they're going to have to answer the question at some point, and
I think at some point, though, part of the discussion, part of the work that one has to do here is also to look at this and work with the city and the MWRD on this to determine whether or not the pavers make sense in light of, we're still going to be providing retention. Having them be permeable pavers as the facilitator of the detention, or having it be asphalt that directs all the water to bioswales in the middle.
Right.
like what works better?
Right.
What works better,
Yeah.
what makes more sense for the budget, what works better long term? There's going to be a lot of different layers.
I understand
I
that.
agree, yeah, right.
Just don't let that little
Slide
thing
just
get in
because
the way.
because of the
If
permission.
that makes sense, we will go after
And I think
that.
that's what we were saying, we weren't there yet, right?
Right.
We had to let them do their work, right? And we're still working through that, I guess. So I just wanted to bring it up because
Thank
it
you.
is something that
Thank you.
we talked about. The other thing I think we should talk about,
Can I have a quick follow-up question? Do other communities give credit for, yes, they do?
Yes.
Are we oddballs here?
for permeable.
Park Ridge is unique.
Very good.
We know, we live here.
Not in a. Let's just say.
Special.
Jim, can you flip back to the interior? I want to talk about the studio room for a second. See the dotted line there?
Oh,
To the south.
Currently, this is 60 by 80, right?
correct.
The dotted line is 60 by 90. 60 by 90? We've gone through this. Well, the alternate, yeah, so it's showing 60 by 80, and we're talking about either 60 by 90 or 60 by 95. I can't remember. By 90, I think. So that is a cost concern. However, what we've talked about is that we think we're going to have some cost savings with the netting and the poles if we don't do the whole west side, which won't affect the safety, the safety aspect. We'll do the whole north side, of course. That's the side that will go, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it is by the dog park, right? We have to do that. We have to raise the netting in place. And then the east side is where the balls are flying, hopefully. We're going to correct those attempt to correct all of that. We think we can have some savings, and we haven't dug in, and that's where we're not to the point of saying, yes, this is, you know, the exact cost differences at this point, because there could be some savings in that, on the west side. The west side helps keep the ball, you know, from the staff going in the forest and in the golf balls. But, so those, I think, are the major changes, and what we're trying to do tonight
Can
is,
you clarify, you're trying to make it bigger or you made it smaller?
It's a little smaller right now.
Okay.
And we're trying, we think, that we're pretty sure we can get it back to 60 by 90 is what we're talking about.
Okay.
Or 95. By doing, you know, by giving up a little bit.
Is that more of a regulation size or something, or no? Just more and more?
60 by 80 was a lot of the rinks in the area way back when.
Okay.
They built it that size. But after talking to a lot of the managers, at a minimum, 60 by 90. Jim and I talked about bumping it as far as we can. That's why it's 60 by 95. But it just increases what you can program on that space drastically. 60 by 80 is too small.
Okay.
And we showed to the public 60 by 90.
You showed the what?
60 by 90.
95.
Oh, you did?
95. Oh, we showed public 60 by 90.
Yeah. So a lot of discussion about that 5 feet. But, so regardless, I wanted to point that out, that is also right now, you know, that's why that dotted line is that we're doing everything we can to get that back.
The idea with the dotted line was to show that the impact on where the building's going is fairly minimal. Because you see, like, to the south, it's really that outside. It doesn't cause us to have to change something else.
So.
I have another quick question. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
So with these tweaks, have these been shown to the affiliates, like the relevant affiliates yet?
Not yet. We want to show the board.
Especially like for hockey and
No,
the
that's the
different,
next
how
step.
people are coming in and coming into,
Right.
so not yet.
No, we wanted to show the board first and
Okay.
see if the board is comfortable with these changes, just keep moving forward in this direction. If there was some big opposition and, you know, one thing or another, we would change course and then come back to the board with this. But we're trying to hone in the price, you know, the cost, and that would be the next thing. You know, once we get, you know, if the board's good with this general, he wants to change something, White has been working very hard on getting the cost nailed down, and we wanted to come back and talk about where we are, you know, at this moment with the cost, but there's, you know, there's still gonna be unknowns, right? Until we go to bed, we're not gonna.
I think the other thing to point out about it though is that we've retained programmatic features and in fact enhanced on some of them, like the locker room. Maybe the location's different, but the size of the locker rooms have been enhanced. And every one of those changes and steps have come through conversations with the rec team who work very closely with the affiliates and very in tune with what their needs are, so.
We've talked to them about the locker rooms and the storage, you know.
Obviously, these people supported the referendum, they worked hard to get people to vote for it, and they're big users of the facility, so
Yeah,
that's why
sure.
I asked.
That's next. Like I said, we didn't want to, I don't like to show anything that we haven't shown to the board first. So it's not a good idea. So our intent, like I said, is to get your feedback on anything that's, you know, seems like out of question, you need to change that. But as Terry said, we've kept the program that, you know, we've kept the program that we showed to the public. So we're good, the staff is, you know, in a good place with this. And then we'll come back and talk to you about, you know, once we hone in on, you know, more of the cost. We are in the ballpark at this moment. We're having discussions in a budget meeting next week with White to talk about some of the FF&E, and those are the things that aren't in there, but not line item, but they're a lump sum that we have to look at to see, you know, do we have enough in there for those things?
And Sandra won't be here.
See the smile on her face? Oh, Karen. Sandra's been involved with the.
I think it's, I hope it's a good question. And it is a little hard to say, we'll talk about money later, but like, to go to 95 or 90 feet, how much more is that add to the budget? Just
$300,000.
$300,000.
Yeah. $325,000,
Just for the 90, for the 30 feet or whatever it is.
whatever, is it the 95? Good.
It's, the width of it's roughly, I think, 75 feet, so additional 10 to 15 feet, so yeah, you're talking, it was about 325.
But we were thinking we could take that from, hopefully, from the Nottingham Cove, which we have not, that's on Terry's list next, to talk to that's kind of an independent thing, to talk about that, you know, and what that's going to cost us.
But it would generate additional programming
Yes.
revenue? Is that, it would be easier to rent that size or?
If we keep it 60 by 80, we're going to lose a drastic amount of revenue. So if you look long-term, it's going to more than compensate for that difference.
Tell me more, like, what kinds of things can you do and like, with that extra fee? Like, give me examples.
So for an example, if you take our U8 teams, which are our mites, our little guys, you can actually put both teams on that surface if it's 60 by 90. Whereas, believe it or not, that 10-foot of difference does make a big difference. And you can only put one team on there. So you're not maximizing what your practice time, right? With the 60 by 90, you can also do some freestyle sessions based on, you know, capacity, where you can't, there's just not enough space in 60 by 80. And again, you're thinking 10 feet, but it does, on an ice surface, it is a big difference. So lower end speed skating can do training on 60 by 90. So you start talking about speed skating, figure skating, hockey, you know, broomball can play on 60 by 80, right? They're just running around in their shoes. But, you know, the ice sports, you know, it's a lot of the like goaltending instructors like to do clinics on studio rinks because it's cheaper, it's more cost effective for them. But if they don't have enough space, then now they're losing 2-3 goalies, and then that's hitting their bottom line, so they're going to go somewhere else. And when we were going through this, I started going to all the different studio rinks in the area, and like Skokie has a 60 by 80, and it's too small. Like their manager flat out said, he goes, it's too small. Glenview had the same thing before they renovated, and their manager's like, we wish we had built this thing bigger, but again, it was built so long ago. So when they built these studio rinks back in the past, they just didn't have that foresight, and things have evolved too. You know, the training's evolved, the things that the skaters can do have evolved. So, you know, as time has gone on, I mean, McFetrich has the nicest studio rink I've ever seen. It's fairly new. They built it just before the pandemic, and it's 100 by, what's it? 100 by 80, and it's basically a massive zone. It's like half the ice surface at Oakton, so you can really program that. So we're trying to get it as close to that as possible within the footprint of what we have to work with, and obviously the money. But just to give you some examples.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I'm not a hockey person,
Sure.
so I wanted to be able to.
It's very niche-y, like ice sports is very niche-y. So, and what we've seen is just a lot of different programming over the years has evolved, and it's more training based. You know, where speed skaters, you think, well, they need a bigger ice surface, but a lot of the intro skaters, they like the smaller ice surface because they're not as intimidated being on a big ice surface, and they can stay more controlled. The figure skaters, we just hired Chris Canaran, who's our new skating director. You know, he's bringing a pairs program. He and his wife were national pairs champions. You know, he's building a pairs program here in Chicago, which is the first of its kind. No one else has a pairs program in Chicago. And he was excited about it because he can do a lot of training with just lifts and things like that on the studio rink, but you need that size.
To piggyback what Brendan said, and I don't know if you used the term boatload or Brendan, was that? What's been great for White Company to date is we've had a lot of these conversations that have gone fairly in depth to talking about operations and revenue. And I forgot to mention too, another one of the drivers of wanting to move the studio rink away from where the concept plan was, that allows us to have another season with the ice rink where we can phase the construction work and have that additional season of revenue to, you know, to complement this individual project. Now, even with repurposing that two-story building, we still have that opportunity to salvage that work towards the end and work around with the field house and whatnot. But that's what's been great so far is staff's been very open with us, and we've had those in-depth conversations, trying to focus on not just this project, but just moving forward with what the impact is on the site that's currently yours.
You don't think of that old section, that it's not gonna look anything like it looks now, the old section of the building.
Oh. It's got some beauty to it. I have a question. So did you tighten the footprint? Like that's the inside square footage, right? But is the outside square footage smaller?
So the original square footage, it's this one here, was 112,000. That's out to out. That's perimeter. That's
outside.
out to out.
Okay.
So with the final, we were able to squeeze out almost 8,000 square feet. Now, the 1370 number, that accommodates the studio rink getting bigger to the requested, like 70 by 10 or 70 by 10.
Oh, that's what that is.
That's what that number is.
Okay. Okay. And 2 of the buildings will have flat roofs?
This, the 3 main function spaces, the 2 rinks and the field house, those have the pitch roofs. Everything else, all the lobby, the administrative, multi-purpose, that is a single flat roof throughout. Now again, at the entry point where the vestibule is at, that roof is bumped up to provide some additional volume, but behind it is a simple flat roof, which you won't see unless you're on.
Well, I'm just thinking for
Railroads.
maintenance, you really don't like flat roofs. So, but, you know, I see that we had to fit everything together, and you all did that, which is great. I'm a little worried about that single entry with all those
Team rooms.
the team rooms being so far away.
We could talk about that for certain times, you'll open those doors, right? Is the plan, maybe?
Oh,
We're
for
still-
security?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
team.
have
walk.
staff available.
I mean, you'd
It
have
just
staff.
seems like
You'd have
Better
staff.
than walking downstairs.
yeah.
Yeah, but people
It's an
didn't
improvement.
people didn't pay that much money to say it's better than walking downstairs. They're gonna say, who the hell designed this? So,
We talked a lot about that and just the fact that people could just come and go right as they walk in. And that wasn't ideal with this shift as a plan. So we went back and forth a few times with the bleachers on that side, that side, and, you know, we ended up here because of the function of the whole facility. But there definitely could be times when we have extra staff who can help monitor that area when it's busy. You know, ideally, if we have, you know, just someone at the registration desk, we would want people to be able to just sneak right in there without going
Yeah, we
past
have to have
anyone.
staff.
right,
And those aren't always used as team rooms.
right.
Any other comments at this point? We'll show this to the affiliates, and for the, probably we'll, for the next meeting, we'll try to have that feedback from the affiliates, if there's any, you know, information that they want to share. But just reach out if you have any other, we're going to get this and we'll send this to you as well, as with the other presentation. We'll send that to the board tomorrow. Anything else?
That's good.
Okay.
My only comment, in addition to the revenue, I'm more concerned with what we present to the public and being as close to that as possible. So I would encourage us to look for cost savings in the netting and add it to the studio rate.
And to show that to the
Correct.
public.
Yeah.
And to figure it out. Yeah, that's where I'm leaning.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem, when you look at the millions that are being put into it, it doesn't seem like the place to then shortchange it for the 325 and have it be less usable.
Okay, I agree. So, Jim, maybe you can make that change to include it. Okay. Anybody else? Great, thank you. Thank you,
Sorry,
John.
this assumes like a solar-ready roof still too, or no?
So, one of the things we're investigating as we update the numbers, we have two options. One is for the field house, by removing the skylights, obviously that opens up an area that would be amenable for a solar-ready roof. Now, what will happen is the steel tonnage will have to go up to accommodate the weight of those. That we have not priced yet.
Okay.
We can come up with a number and we can determine, if that's a reasonable part of the budget. The other option is the existing rink. I have a note for our structural engineer to look at potentially seeing if the structural impact on the existing roof would allow us to put solar panels up there, which would be very ideal, but sometimes those roofs are built to the bare minimum, don't have that extra capacity. It's something we're going to
You could do solar in a parking lot. Have you seen those parking lots?
Yeah, I have.
I mean, I don't think it has to be on the roof. I'm just saying.
I'm going to be in Arizona or California if we get
Cincinnati Zoo.
sunlight year
Go to
round, we can do it in the
Cincinnati
parking
Zoo.
lot.
It's a thing.
All right.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you. Now, you're up with the executive
Yes.
director's report.
So, the agenda item that is next is the Local Government Efficiency Act discussion. I know we've had, Dirk did a great explanation about this committee. I have materials in the packet on pages 2 through 7. I just wanted to bring it up again because at the next meeting, I'll be bringing, on page 2, there's a sample resolution. Does a good job of laying out the specific duties, I believe, and what we're studying. So we'll be bringing this resolution back with the names. We do have two community members that have agreed. I haven't personally heard from the second one, but I need to reach out to her again. So we should be good there. But just a few reminders that the committee needs to be made up of the board, the entire board, 2 residents, the executive director and/or other staff members. We have to, by law, form this committee by June 10th, and that happens by passing the resolution that is attached. The committee will meet 3 times in the 18 months, and the 18 months starts following the formation of the committee. An Open Meetings Act needs to be followed for these meetings. And then the end result is the committee has to submit a report to Cook County. And the deadline is, if we pass the resolution on the 18th, then it would be November 18th, 2024. So again, it describes in the second paragraph on page 2 of the items that we'll be studying as a collective committee. It'll demonstrate the ways in which we efficiently and effectively deliver our services to the residents. IAPD has a sample report, which I've taken a look at, but I'll be looking at it obviously a lot more carefully. And as Dirk had mentioned at the last meeting, we want to show uniquely in Park Ridge how we, operate efficiently and effectively. So once the committee's formed, I'll also forward that to the board so you can get an idea of what they're suggesting, or I can send it any time. I was down in Springfield for a few days this week for the legislative conference, and Jason Anselman, who is the legal counsel, said that they will be having a seminar, a webinar on June 27th to kind of walk through what they're suggesting in terms of how we go about this. But I'm thinking, that we'll probably split it in thirds and tackle like a third of it at each of these meetings. And we'll set the meetings once we get the resolution passed. So we can either do, and we can talk through that, or we can talk through it now if you want to meet like earlier, like than these meetings on meeting nights, because we'll meet all 7 commissioners. You know, maybe we have 3 times that we meet at 6 or whatever time, because our meetings aren't long enough.
We all have to be in the meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, really? I thought it was just
Meet up with 7 commissioners, 2 residents,
I think Dirk should be here too.
and myself. It's not required. We'll be paying him.
That's easy, talking about the good stuff you do, that's easy.
Great. Just a lot of gathering of data, I think. I'll be doing.
I guess I need to come since Mary Ann won't be here to remember everything.
So we still haven't had open comments for new business, right?
No, we have not.
Denied.
Oh, the public?
Denied.
The public?
Yes. So, any questions? Any more questions this time? Pretty excited?
Do we get dinner with it too?
Yes, if I'm making you come early. Huh? Wow. They're saying it's like, I can't wait, budget this.
The dinner's gonna be salad from the repurposed tree.
That's good.
All right, so, moving on to finance and Commissioner Bowe.
And I'll turn it over to Superintendent DeAndrews.
For the last time.
So, what we have here is a resolution that is appointing Karen, who is succeeding me, as the authorized agent for IMRF, which is the district's pension fund.
I'll go ahead with the motion, then we'll do a discussion. All right, I move that the board adopt resolution number 23-2, a resolution adopting authorized agent for the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. Second.
Second.
Discussion?
Just to note that it's appointing, not adopting.
I'm sorry. Appointing. That's correct.
Go ahead.
Looking forward to it.
All right. If there's any comments?
Roll call?
Commissioner Bendy?
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hulting?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Leduc?
Aye.
And it passes, and we'll pass it over to
Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Terry to talk about Northeast Park.
Great,
The
thank
ball
you.
believer.
So if you may recall, we did have money for Northeast Park tennis court repair and servicing. We did discuss back in February, I believe it was, that we were going to go ahead and repurpose some of those courts and re-stripe them and orientate them so that they could be used as pickleball. And so we have been working with an engineer to get that bid package together. The bids have been put out. We actually had a pre-bid meeting this morning. And so we're just moving along with the plan at this point. We do anticipate having these bids opened up and then asking for approval at the next board meeting on May 18th. So we don't know specifically when this project's going to happen yet. We're a little skeptical that there's any availability in the color coding market, but we heard there's a chance. So the way we did it was, you tell us, can you do it? But if you start, you got to start and work consistently until it's done. And so if it's going to happen during the summer, we're going to jump on the opportunity to work a little bit closely with the rec team about what kind of impact that would have to the programs or tennis lessons. But we aren't really sure that's going to happen. More likely, it's going to be a late fall or maybe even possibly a spring project next year. So we'll see where it lands and be able to see what happens, which was kind of what we understood going into this one. So, but we'll find out more and we'll talk more about it in the next week.
Sounds good. Any
questions? Ironically, I only saw tennis players at Northeast Park today. There were lessons there. I can't remember, who were the lessons, April? They were full, like between 3:30 and 4.
Was it?
Do you remember?
It was probably our lessons.
Was
I
it?
would assume.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, so anyway.
All right, then I will move it back to President Leduc.
And as for new business, I do actually have a piece of new business today. So tonight we say farewell to a familiar face. This is the last board meeting Sandra DeAngelis, the district's superintendent of finance, will be attending before her retirement at the end of the month. Sandra has been with the Park Ridge Park District since August of 2013. During this time, she has led the accounting, information technology, and payroll staff. Her accomplishments are many. Most importantly, Sandra has managed the district's annual budget, audits, investments, and bond management. Under her leadership, the district has achieved the GFOA's Annual Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for 9 consecutive years. This has been an incredible time of growth for the Park District with a focus on many capital improvement projects requiring Sandra's strong financial oversight. These projects include the referendum, purchase and development of Prospect Park, the Centennial Aquatic Center renovation, Main Park Leisure Center renovation, Oakton Park and Facilities Master Planning and Referendum, grant projects for the Wildwood Nature Center, 531 Forest View, Woodland Park, Hinkley Park, and South Park, a number of playground replacements, and millions more in other capital improvements. There are so many projects to highlight under her tenure, some which include revisions to the financial policies, management of the Uptown TIF agreement, refunding of the Prospect bonds to provide savings to the district's taxpayers, implementation of a purchasing card program for the district, expansion of our security camera system, and improvements to our information technology infrastructure. While the pandemic was a time of uncertainty, Sandra's ability to analyze and forecast with a calm demeanor was a comfort to the Board of Park Commissioners and district staff. We extend our sincere gratitude for your hard work, dedication, and your achievements at the district, and congratulate you on your well-deserved retirement. So thank you for everything, Sandra.
Thank you all. It's really been a pleasure working with all of you. I really want to thank the board for your support and all of the treasurers that I've worked with. I really appreciate your support in particular. And working in public finance has been a wonderful career, and being able to be part of all of the things that you've mentioned to enhance the community, makes me really, really happy. So thank you all.
Yeah.
Thanks you.
You guys are getting up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Out of the picture.
Karen, you're still in the phone.
All right, we're still in the meeting.
I don't know. We could probably.
It's cookies, Jen made.
More cookies.
All right.
I actually think it's cash.
No, it's definitely not
So-
We need all cash.
All right, so now, if nobody has any other new business, I move to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
We have dessert.